Hey, what's up, guys? It's Reid Young for TransformPoker.com. Going to be checking out this heads-up 2-4 hand where we have pocket jacks. And so there's a ton of different things going on in this hand, but I really want to take the opportunity in this video to talk about turning hands into bluffs. And so if you guys don't know, I guess just a short-term definition for turning a hand into a bluff is taking a hand that has potentially some showdown value and then using it to bluff your opponent off of better hands. So it's just like a normal bluff, except for you may have a close decision between a call and a raise, where most bluffs that we're used to making are just busted draws that are closer to like 9 high. So, there's absolutely no reason that you're ever going to call the hand. So turning a hand into a bluff can be a little confusing, and that's why I wanted to make this video for you guys. So we have jacks. We get 3-bet heads up. Most of the time you're going to want to 4-bet here. I would say I probably always 4-bet jacks just because they're pretty vulnerable post-flop. You're going to flop an overcard to your jacks, at least one overcard, around 60% of the time, maybe a little more. So it's not the best idea to slow play because you're not really in a fantastic situation post-flop. Oh yeah, and one more thing I wanted to say. If you guys can kind of hear maybe like a staticky grinding sound a little bit in the background, we're making some ice cream over here. So we got the maker going. I figured I'd make this YouTube video for you guys in the meantime. So rocking out the vanilla, not too interesting, but we're kind of in the experimental phase so far. Anyway, we call the jacks. I don't think it's the best play, but if you guys want, you can just pretend that we have 10-9 here. It's going to play about the same. So on the flop, the villain continuation bets just over half pot. It's a pretty standard continuation betting size, so definitely calling here because this is a king high board. It's one he's going to be continuation betting a ton of the time, and other than a king, this is about the best hand that we can have. So other than pocket sixes, something like that, a weird 2-pair, jacks are looking pretty good. So we call the flop. The turn is an 8 and it brings a flush draw we get bet into, and we decide to call again. I think the turn's probably going to be pretty close, but when you're in a heads-up match against an aggressive opponent, and actually the reads on this opponent are really, we don't have any reads because we're at an anonymous table and the match is just getting started. You guys can see from the stack sizes it doesn't look like too much money is exchanged hands yet. The player who posted this hand on 2+2 said really not much else other than that it's an anonymous table and he doesn't really know about this guy. So what we can do there is kind of rely on the general subset of middle stakes no limit heads up players, which I found personally to be a bit over bluffy in spots. So if you were to take what would be a near optimal strategy for any given spot, they're probably going to be bluffing a bit more often than they should be, which means we should be calling a little bit more often than we should be. Optimally, that is. So to exploit our opponent, I think this turn is probably going to be a standard call, if not standard for a near optimal strategy. It's kind of a fancy way of saying either way you look at it, the turn's a call. So on the river, here's where it gets kind of interesting. It's a pretty terrible card for our hand. It's an offsuit ace. So if our opponent was semi-bluffing on the turn with ace queen or ace jack, he's going to be betting. If he has queen jack, then he has a straight. So not the best river in the world. I don't think we're going to have a profitable call against really anyone unless he's just kind of like monkeying around on the turn with just any 2 cards. Even then, it could be still close. So the big blind bets just over half pot again on the river, and we decide to go all in. And I think this is actually a pretty good play depending on whether or not you believe your opponent is going to fold a hand like ace queen here. And then if he is trying to value bet for some reason a hand like king queen, then it becomes a pretty fantastic play. I think value betting king queen would be a mistake since it's extremely unlikely that a worse hand will call. But you can see that check calling might be not the best idea as well. That's kind of where a lot of middle stakes players get confused because they don't tend to have balanced check calling ranges. So when you're worried about check folding king queen always, that just means you need to add some stronger hands into your check calling range. Anyway, getting a little sidetracked from the turning the hand into a bluff point, we go ahead and raise all in with our jacks, and it's good because we block queen jack. We don't really represent that many hands because we were probably 4-betting tens pre-flop. And I know some of you guys might say, well, we didn't 4-bet jacks, so why would we 4-bet tens? I think both of those are a mistake. So any decent player is going to assume that we don't really have kings, we don't really have tens, we have sixes some of the time, we have eights some of the time, probably less often than sixes. So really our raise represents ace-10, which is a pretty thin raise for value if you don't expect ace-queen to call always, basically, because then we're just going to run into stronger hands too often. And yeah, I mean, that's really about it. Ace-10 and queen-jack. So we don't really represent many hands for value, which means we don't want to be bluffing that often if we're talking about an optimal strategy, like a balanced strategy. On the other hand, you come across opponents who, and this is kind of the great thing about turning a hand into a bluff, are just always going to be folding a one-pair hand because we're representing a very strong hand, even though there's only a few combinations of those hands, that is pocket sixes or queen-jack type hands, maybe ace-10, that our opponent is just always going to give us credit for it because we can't really have any other air in our range. If you guys look at the way the board comes out, there just isn't a way that we can get to the river with air unless we called the flop with, you know, like 4 or 5 of clubs for some reason, and that just doesn't make any sense. So if our opponent's always giving us credit, I think this is a fantastic spot for a bluff. We don't have enough showdown value, in my opinion, for a call, so it's between raising or folding, and I think raising here is great. And another cool thing you guys can see is we're actually getting a very good price on the bluff, and that's definitely something you want to keep an eye out for. There's a lot of spots where you do not want to turn your hand into a bluff, so make sure that you're actually representing a strong range when you do raise. And if you guys have any more questions about turning a hand into a bluff, hit me up in the comments section and I will try, like always, to answer every one. Alright, take care, guys.